Hi, this is Francis Wade over here at Scheduleu, and today we're going to go through a new update of SkedPal 2.6. So let me flip right over to the screen, show you what the improved new screen looks like. Okay, so this is the new SkedPal screen. As you can see, I've opened it up to the page that has the task list, which is a page that most people open up the program into when they're first starting out. And immediately you may be able to notice that there are some changes. So the first big change that's been introduced, and by the way, this isn't a major update. It's sort of a removal of some of the friction that users of previous versions have felt. But the big difference here, the first one you'd see, is that in addition to the areas and the tags, there's actually a brand new item over here on the left. So typically in SkedPal, areas such as work, personal, and tutorials break down into projects, which then are further broken down into tasks. And over in this left pane, you could take a look at the different areas, take a look at the projects that are within each area. You could look at the tags, that are applied to each task. And here's a brand new way of looking at tasks. It's called filters. And it drives you all the way down to the task level and separates tasks in sort of a very interesting way. So let me start off by sort of giving you some background with respect to how SkedPal manages tasks and sees tasks, because that'll make the rest of the explanation sort of very simple to understand. So when SkedPal is doing its thing, it is managing all of its tasks. So you can put any kind of task that you want in SkedPal. It breaks them down immediately, or it sees them in sort of two different buckets. The first bucket is the tasks which are already scheduled, and SkedPal maintains a 3-week schedule from the current day out into the future. And then there's the tasks which are not scheduled, which are in what SkedPal calls its backlog. Okay, so these two separate kinds of tasks are treated very differently. In prior versions of SkedPal, there was no unscheduled backlog. Everything was scheduled. So essentially the program forced you to pick a due date, pick a date on which you're going to actually do work, pick a duration, even though you may not have wanted to. So users complained, said they wanted a better system, and this version has it. Of course, it's been implemented for some time, but in this version the two are quite separated. So when a task is scheduled, it's broken down into either a fixed task, which is sort of an appointment, usually involving another person, something that cannot be moved, or it joins what's called your in focus, or it's brought into focus. And you're the one who toggles in focus on or off. When it's in focus, SkedPal does its very best to put it in the current schedule. And the two together gives you the schedule for the next 3 weeks out. Okay, so what's brand new is you now can see the unscheduled backlog very clearly. So let me go right back to the new screen on SkedPal. And as you can see, there's a brand new line item on the backlog. It's what SkedPal calls one of its filters. So now you can see all of the items that are in the backlog that aren't being scheduled. So I'm going to click on mine and you can see what they look like. And where do these come from? Well, for me, these were tasks that were previously scheduled and I decided to unschedule them because I changed my mind or decided to delay them, but I put them back on the shelf, so to speak. So they're not lost to the system, they're just in the backlog. And I have a good number of these, a good number of pages sort of since I've been using SkedPal, and it includes some of them which I did place in focus. So they were placed in focus at some point. I didn't take them off of focus, but what SkedPal has done is, and let me go back to the diagram, it's sort of very intelligently decided that in your backlog, there's two kinds of tasks: the ones that you have deliberately defocused, which is the vast majority, and then there's a handful that remain in focus. And the reason they remain in focus but they're not a part of your schedule is that simply because, well, I'll show you why. But here's an example of design intake interactive for Scheduleu. It's a someday task. So this particular task is a 4-hour task. It's a big one. And it's scheduled for someday, indicating that it has a really low priority for me. So SkedPal is unable to schedule this 4-hour block of time in the next 3 weeks. So it put it back on the shelf, back into the unscheduled backlog, and says, can't schedule it, but in the future, obviously it's not a high priority, but we'll pull it off the shelf, and then someday will come at some point. But SkedPal has not forgotten the task. It's just that it can't fit this particular task in its 3-week horizon. Okay, so your unscheduled backlog is made up of these defocused items, which are the majority, and in my case, I have a very small handful, 3 or 4 in focus items. And what's very different about this one, this particular iteration, 2.6, is that now you can actually see what's in the backlog for the very first time, separated. And that can make a very big difference, because now you can see where any task may be that may have gotten lost before. Previously, all you could do is see the tasks that were in your schedule, and you'd have to go hunting for the tasks that weren't in your schedule. No, they're all in one place. It's a great innovation. Will make a big difference as we try to control and gain visibility into what's happening in our schedule. And then there's another filter, another brand new one, which is on hold. So what happens when you put something on hold? Well, let's look at my tasks, which are currently on hold. So as you can see, a lot of them belong to the same project. So what I actually did was to put the entire project on hold, and it dragged all of the items and put them on hold also. So they are actually a part of the tasks that are they're not scheduled, but they are sort of waiting to be scheduled, waiting for me to take them off hold in order to schedule them. And then for the first time, once again, this brand new filter allows me to see them all in one place. So that I could go back in, for example, if I were to take this particular project, MDTD plus improvements, and took it off of hold, SkedPal will then attempt to try and put all of these in my schedule. Once I hit the update schedule button, it probably would not succeed based on what I'm seeing in my schedule, but it would try to put them all in my next 3-week schedule. Chances are a bunch of them would bounce out and end up in backlog. Okay. So the third filter, which is another brand new one, is the completed filter. And this sort of speaks for itself. Items that have been done, finished, and completed. It puts a line through them, and now for the first time, you can see them all in one place, including sort of going back in history. So if you're someone who tracks your tasks as they're done each day, this is a great boon. This is a great help. This is something I do. I track my time. So in other words, I track my tasks. So that's very helpful. And then the fourth filter that's brand new is to see all the recurring tasks in one place. Okay, as you can imagine, that's pretty helpful, because having recurring tasks is a really important part of managing all of your tasks in your calendar. And here at Scheduleu, we focus on training you to become a total task scheduler, which means that you don't do very many tasks without first having them worked out and planned and located in your calendar. So your calendar is your central point of control, and you're bouncing back and forth. Using a tool like SkedPal, of course, makes it ridiculously easy, but you're bouncing back and forth between your calendar and the tasks to figure out, okay, what's the optimal configuration. But SkedPal is doing all that work when you hit that reschedule button. So the next innovation actually has to do with recurring items. And here's where you've been given a whole nother level of flexibility in 2.6. So in prior versions, what recurrence meant was, for example, every week, starting on a Monday, starting at 9 a.m., for example. But now you can schedule things like habits or behaviors or reminders or just sort of actions. For example, sending your mom an email 3 times a week to remind her that you're thinking of her. If she got these emails at 12 o'clock on Monday, Wednesday, and Friday every week, she started to get pretty suspicious, right? So instead, what you can now do is schedule tasks to occur within a time frame according to whatever frequency you decide. So for example, you could go in and say, I want to schedule this particular task, and I want to have it happen 6 times in the next month, 6 times per month. And SkedPal will find the time. Same way, you can go in on a weekly basis and I want to schedule this maybe 4 times a week. And you can even take it down to the day level of detail. You can say, I want to schedule something and do it 2 times per day. So SkedPal will when you hit the update schedule button, will actively go looking for the time and come up with an optimal schedule the way it always does, except that now there's way more freedom to schedule tasks at not quite random, but definitely not fixed times. So that can be very useful because we think of tasks falling not necessarily according to this rigid calendar, but sort of being opportunistic. They fall that we prefer to accomplish them and do them at the best times. And we have the highest energy when we're interested, when we're motivated. So we can do all of this with this particular feature, which is recurrence on a sort of an ad hoc but not completely random basis. So then the third new innovation is around the use of memory. So once again, if you're a total task scheduler or a SkedPal user, you've been scheduling a lot of your time using different tools like buffers and tasks and appointments, and executing a task at a particular time becomes critical. Not every task, but there's some tasks that if your days just remain on track, do need to be started at a particular time. If they're an input to another task, you've got to get them done so that the actual task you have in mind can get done on time because the input is finished. So this particular feature is just a reminder feature. It's tied to 2 kinds of tasks, either tasks that have been pinned in your calendar or have been scheduled at a fixed time in your SkedPal calendar. So what will happen very simply is that it pops up a reminder 5 minutes just before it's due. And of course, you need to have the SkedPal desktop app running at the time that it pops up. So if you're someone who runs the SkedPal desktop app frequently and all the time, then this can be a reminder can be very, very useful. Now, it doesn't remind you, however, of appointments that may exist in your Outlook calendar or your Google calendar. It also won't remind you of other kinds of tasks, just the 2 that I mentioned. So I for example, don't use the SkedPal desktop app that frequently. I open it and then close it. So this one wouldn't work for me. But the problem of having a good reminder system, of course, that doesn't go away. So for months, a couple of years actually, I've been looking for an app that could run on its own, that could synchronize in the background with my Google Calendar. and haven't been able to find a suitable one. You know, they promised different things, but then they didn't quite deliver. So my background is, in the past I used to use an Outlook calendar, and it has a great reminder system. If you're willing to run Outlook all the time, it'll be happy to remind you. So my compromise, because I've now moved to Google Calendar, is to pick up a brand new app, and it's Google Calendar based, and it does really great reminders, and it's called Checker Plus. And it's a very lightweight app. It sort of sits in Chrome as a plugin, and when it pops up a reminder, it looks, see if you can see that, looks something like that. Test reminder for demo. And then you can either dismiss it or delete it. In this case, I'll just dismiss it because I just made it up just for the purpose of our conversation today. And it works very well. The penalty, of course, is that I need to keep Chrome running all the time. And Chrome is a memory hog, I know, but not ideal, but the best of both worlds. But the idea of having a reminder is a really important one, as I said, for total task schedulers. If you're familiar with the movie, the television series, The West Wing, there was a character who supported President Jeb Bartlett. Her name was Mrs. Landingham. And she was the sort of the perfect secretary. And what she would do is tap on his shoulder and say, here's what you need to do next. You need to stop what you're doing now. You need to move on. And she kept him in check. In other words, she kept him going. And if he ever got to the end of a task and had extra time, he would look to her and he would say, what's next? So we want to have that kind of relationship ultimately with our calendar, where the reminders help us to move on, tell us what's next, sort of take away the thinking about the sequencing of our calendar away from our conscious mind and puts it into a system that we can use. So I wrote an article that I'll mention this. I'll put this actually in the notes for this particular episode. How to organize your notifications to accomplish the perfectly notified self. The article talks about Mrs. Landingham and the need that we have as total task schedulers to have a great reminder system, and how important it is for us to use it to remain on schedule. Okay. All right, so the final innovation has to do with the hot list. So as you probably know, the hot list is a place where anything that cannot be scheduled or anything that we have not completed shows up. It's a sort of a problem area, an area where the program cannot feasibly create a schedule that would support us because we were asking it to do too much, or we forgot to do something and need to reschedule it, but it's an area that shows up for problems. And what would happen in the past is that you had a recurring item like check email. So I have check email twice a day in my calendar. So if I didn't check email, didn't check email for a couple of days, God forbid, but if it did happen, I would come back and I would find 3 or 4 notifications that I need to check email. Because what it would do is that it would pick up the recurrence and, in sort of a very blunt way, just list the recurrence in your hot list. So that would cause your hot list to be much longer than it really should be. So in this new version of 2.6, what they have done is they've consolidated these error messages in the hot list into single items. So instead of 4 different indicators that I needed to check email, there'd be 1 indicator. Because it understands, 2.6 understands that there is recurrence and there's no need to show you the same item multiple times. Okay, so it's a much more streamlined way of indicating that there is an issue with your system. Okay, so that's it. So thanks for sticking around. You've seen a few things that we're up to here at SkedPal and here at Scheduleu, and stay tuned. There's a lot coming with respect to where SkedPal is going, and hopefully other apps and programs as they come along, we'll tell you all about them here at Scheduleu. And thanks for listening in. This is Francis, and I'm signing out until next time. All the best.